Good afternoon. I'm Dan with 4 Winds Ancestral Skills. Today I'll be covering how to use rose hips to make a powerful antioxidant tea that actually tastes pretty good too. Got a lot to cover, so stick around. Well, it's early winter out here in the Ozarks, so foraging, as always, gets a little bit more difficult this time of year, especially for anything resembling a fruit. But we do have these, which are rose hips, and interestingly enough, they actually taste better going into the winter. After they've been through a few frosts, they actually start tasting a little bit better. If you ever had one that's really fresh, you'll know what I'm talking about. They last pretty much through the winter, but they start kind of falling off. The birds kind of start picking at them. So middle to early winter is about the best time to get the maximum harvest. Now these are great this time of year to be able to have a vitamin C drink with a lot of antioxidants, and you don't get a lot of that flavor this time of year out here foraging. So it's kind of a unique thing. Now there's a lot of different ways you can use the rose hips. You can ultimately make syrups out of them, jams and jellies, oils. There's a number of different things you can do with them. What I'm going to be covering today is just something that's really easy that you can do. Just taking the berries, mash them up a little bit, and making some tea with them. It tastes really good. Doesn't take hardly any time. Doesn't take hardly any equipment. The other things you can do, like I said, you're going to need a little bit more advanced equipment, a kitchen, things like that to do it really well. So what I'll be covering today is just how to make a tasty tea out of these. Now to identify the actual rose hips, they're pretty unique. First of all, the vines or the shrub will have thorns, classic of a rose bush. They'll have varying toothed leaves. These leaves, of course, this time of year are going to be falling off, so they'll be either losing them or they'll be completely absent, so you can't really rely on that as a real guide. The rose hips themselves, at least here in North America, they don't have any sort of lookalikes at this time of year. Well, here's a close-up example of the rose hips. Also, don't worry if they are a little bit wrinkled. That's not a big deal. They generally get that way later in the year, but like I said, they actually do taste better when they are a little bit older anyway. So you take the individual rose hip. If you kind of pop that open, you'll see a number of seeds and then the flesh inside. So there's, as you can see, there's not a lot to it, but the important thing to remember here is these seeds have little hairs around them that are extremely irritating, and you don't really want to eat the seeds directly. You can, of course, make a tea out of this and then filter the seeds out. That's not a big deal, but you don't want to eat it directly, otherwise you're going to have a bad time. If you do scoop the seeds out and get those hairs out, you can eat the flesh directly, but as an example, for these little tiny ones here, there's not a lot of meat there to it. If you do scoop the seeds and get all the hairs and everything out, you're not really left with a whole lot anyway. They do have different varieties that have bigger rose hips, and for those, it is worth it to, if you wanted to scoop the seeds out and then save the actual meat of the hip and do stuff with that, like eat it or put it into things. Okay, I've gathered a number of rose hips in here. Pretty fair amount. You want really at least a tablespoon, maybe 2 tablespoons at the very bare minimum. If you do make it stronger, you can always just add a little bit of water to dilute it down a little bit, but I like mine fairly strong. So what we're going to do is take these here. Just have a stick that I can use, and we just kind of want to crush them up a little bit. We're just looking to kind of split them open. That way they'll infuse into our water a lot better. There we go. All right, now we have this all mashed up. We're going to take this, put it in our water over there on the campfire, and heat it up. Now this here is surface water that was from a creek. So it's good to get it to a rolling boil to make sure it's purified. But now that it's boiling, you just take it off, set it to the side for a minute. The water was 212 degrees, it was a rolling boil. Now what we did is pulled it off, let it cool down a little bit, and then we're going to we scraped some coals down, and we're going to put it on the coals just to keep it hot. We want this to kind of simmer, but not absolutely boil. That way, when we put our rose hips in there, it'll keep them warm and help them infuse into the water, but you won't be boiling away the nutrients and antioxidants and vitamins and whatnot that's in there. So we just put that there. And then we just let that simmer for a good 20 minutes to half an hour, somewhere in there. Okay, it's been simmering now for about 25 minutes or so. Just take a little plastic container here, drape our shamag over it, and then we just pour this through. All this meat here and all the seeds are all in the top layer here, so this will filter all those irritating hairs and off the seeds and everything. There you go. Just simmer the rose hips for at least 20 to 30 minutes, strain out, and you're left with this here. Alright, there you have it, rose hip tea. Delicious. If I were to describe the taste, I'd say it has a hint of maybe tart apple with a bit of sweetness to it. It's kind of hard to describe unless you've actually had some. Now one thing, if it's earlier in the year, it'll be more tart. Later in the year, especially after going through a few frosts, it'll be a little sweeter. So where it is right now, it tastes pretty good. So I certainly enjoy it. Needless to say, it's a good way to give your immune system a little boost and have a decent tasting tea to boot. Well, anyway, if you have any questions or comments, you can leave a comment down below. You can email me at fourwindsancestral@gmail.com or check out my website, fourwindsancestralskills.com. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video and hope to catch you again on the next one. As always, I'm Dan with Four Winds Ancestral Skills, reminding you to get out there and make history. Take care.